Okay, it looks like we're live. Let me know. There's a lot of you already waiting. I guess I always start a little ahead of time. I've noticed, yep, Canadian gal. I haven't seen you around before on the live stream talking about what's going on in Canada. I'm keeping a close eye on what's going on there. I think it's great. I think a lot of people are aware of it all around the world. And I think they're even planning a truckers movement next week. They're supposed to arrive in London on the 5th of February. They're coming all the way down from Scotland. So maybe that's spreading. Yeah, Billy's over here. He's asleep. So we've got Shazam from Detroit. We got Gavster Legrand, Tim Goodson, Crispy Audio. Thank you. We've got Dilwyn Roberts, JP Millward. Hi, JP. Merrick Kalenda, Mike T, Canadian Gal, Ben Gray. Hi, Ben. Over here, I think Lord Humongous is here as well. He says Guillotine Trudeau. Alan Zibelman is here. I saw Rumpelstiltskin is here as well. He's woken up early. He's in Tokyo. Rick Enfeld, Rick Enfed from Nebraska. Hi, Rick. Ralph Potts, St. Louis the 9th. Victoria in Seattle is here. No, that's a real Billy, Steve. It's a real Billy still. He's getting on, but he's still hanging on. He's not, he can't see well anymore, but we go for walks every day, and he's eating well, so he's okay. And Sanderson Mario Chin Up Chubby. You know my thoughts about the truckers. St. Louis the 9th says Brill. Hopefully the Scottish and English lorry convoy line is even longer than Canada's. Yeah. Jonathan Marsh from Maryland. Yeah, I was surprised to hear that from Canadian Gal that she hasn't been out to eat to a restaurant for 2 years. And that's just not on. That's just not on. And I think it's horrible. Even though we've had 240 days of lockdown in 2020 and 21. But now it's pretty much back to normal, even though, I'm not celebrating yet. So my wife and I went out Friday, and we had a nice time. We went out for dinner. So I'm thankful for that. And I hopefully Canadian Gal, you'll be able to do that soon as well. What else? I played golf today. It was a nice day, but early on there was a frost, but we played. I teed off at 8:30. On the back nine, it was sunny already, and the ground was soft. So I had a nice day on the golf course. I played quite well. It could have been better, but I made a couple of birdies, which is good. So yeah, Billy keeps trucking. Pablo, nice to see you, Pablo. Lily Robbins says, I was wearing my Billy Airways sweatshirt in the dog food store, and the cashier asked, is that your dog? I said, I wish. Yeah, that was Pablo Pina's idea. That was over a year ago when they were bailing out all the airlines. I said, well, Billy Airways doesn't take government bailouts. Unfortunately, nowadays, everything seems to be run by the government. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. And the title of the live stream is about the Fed already backtracking. At the same time, they have several Fed presidents making different comments. They're basically confusing people. but we're going to look at the backtrack. AA says, good evening, Mario. Hi, AA. ABC from Albania. Great to see you here. Lord Humongous convoy spreading to US, Australia, New Zealand. JTBSK2, physical silver. Yeah, I agree. And physical gold as well. That's the only way to beat the bankers is through physical, not ETF, not anything else. Gavster says, I wasn't locked down at all, ignored it all. I tried to ignore as much as possible, Gavster, but here in, when there was lockdowns, everything was closed. So you couldn't really go to a restaurant. But I try to keep going as normal as possible. Captain Banana says, love the show. Oh, thank you, Captain Banana. Dave Martin from Cornwall. Belly Dance Arabia says, happy Sunday to everyone. Gavster Legrand, the banksters are the problem. Yeah, they are part of the problem, but I think education's part of the problem as well. And unfortunately, they've captured education, not only school education, but higher education. People are not taught about money. They're not taught, for example, the Austrian School of Economics. I think, and that's why they get away with it. People think that the banks are there to help you, but they're not. Poseidon DeSoto, thank you for your super chat. Hi, Mary and Billy from Washington State. Great to see you, Poseidon. Thank you for your super chat. Echo says, so happy to be joining my favorite show. It's nice to hear that, Echo. Yeah, we'll get on to the main subject of the live stream, the headline, the title, and then, we can just relax and I'll take your questions and try to answer them as best as possible. Sandra 81, Billy collects COVID variants. Yeah, he's on the, what is he now? I don't know, Chi Omega, Phi Delta Theta. He's got all of them. Shazam says Bank of America in trouble, I hear. Well, I think a lot of the banks could be in trouble. And yeah, there's a lot of volatility in the markets. The start of the year hasn't been great for equity markets. We had a big rally on Friday, but I'm not sure we're out of the woods. I'm going to touch upon also the corporate bond market and more, and also the high yield corporate bonds, which is basically junk bonds. They're not looking good either. Echo, thank you for your super chat. We've got MJQ from Vegas. Go Niners. I haven't followed, I don't follow sports that much. The only thing I follow now is golf a little bit. I assume it's the Super Bowl today because the golf tournament finished yesterday on Saturday, and usually on the US PGA Tour, the tournaments finish on Sunday. So I thought, well, there must be probably the Super Bowl today. And I guess the San Francisco 49ers are playing the Super Bowl. But to be honest, I don't follow it at all anymore. My favorite team a long time ago were the Miami Dolphins, but I don't think they're that good anymore. Gabor Pito says, I've been watching your videos for a few months now. Thank you for the constant education. I'm curious how the Fed is backtracking already. Yeah, I'm going to come to that in a minute. I'm just waiting for 9 o'clock. We got a minute to go. I usually come on a little earlier and then I talk to people informally, and then we'll start on the Fed actually right now. So how are they backtracking? Well, maybe not in concert, maybe not Jay Powell, but we saw already, and I'm going to bring up um, this guy here. His name is Neil Kashkari, and he was actually he used to work for Goldman Sachs. This guy here, and he was hired by Hank Paulson, who was the Treasury Secretary during the '08 collapse, and he was hired to help bail out the big banks on Wall Street. Neil Kashkari. So he was working for he went from Goldman Sachs, went to work at the US Treasury for Hank Paulson, who was ex Goldman Sachs. And he made this comment on Friday, Fed Kashkari, and now he's the president of the Minneapolis Fed, says rate hike pause conceivable in the spring. So this is what drove the markets higher. I think the Dow was up like 500 points after he made this comment. So it says here, the Fed will likely raise rates in March to tamp down on too high inflation, Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari said on Friday, but its actions after that will depend on what emerges from the still muddy economic pictures. So just the fact that he's come out and said that is, I would say, interesting. He says, I'm comfortable raising rates a few times, adding that inflation should come down even before the Fed raises rates as supply chains get fixed and fiscal support from last year isn't renewed. So yeah, so I think that was a big part of the market moving higher on Friday. And the other thing we have been seeing lately in the last few months is the president of the St. Louis Fed. He's called Bullard, and he's going the other way. He's being really hawkish. But a few years ago, he was playing the role that Kashkari is playing. So I would say a lot of it is like a manipulation, trying to keep people in the frame of mind that the Fed is going to be successful. But I personally think the Fed is going to have a tough time trying to unwind the inflation that they have created. And it's going to be very difficult for them to raise rates without really, they're already causing a lot of troubles in the markets, I would say. Tricky Dicky, thank you for your super chat. Do you think Ukraine is a distraction from something much bigger? Stock market crash, hyperinflation. Yeah, I tend to agree with that, Tricky Dicky. It is a huge distraction, not just to do with the markets and hyperinflation, but also the political troubles. For example, here in the UK, with this Partygate, and in the US as well, the fact that the administration has very little support. And I don't think it's going to end up with anything really happening in terms of a war there. I think the Europeans, especially the Germans, are not really 100% behind punishing Russia because they want to do business with Russia. MW says 70 degrees sunshine in Arizona. That's nice. Not here in England. I mean, today was probably just above freezing early in the morning when I started playing golf. There was some frost, but by the middle of the day, it was sunny. It wasn't windy. It was probably around low 40s in Fahrenheit. So yeah, so Kashkari trying to keep the markets from collapsing. And the other interesting thing I saw, and this is not really well, it could be a little bit the Fed trying to tamp down expectations of rate hikes and tightening. So this came out Friday, January 28th. Yeah, that was Friday. So it's the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and they keep track of economic data and they forecast. So they came out with this GDP now. So they estimated that the GDP for the first quarter of the year is going to go to almost zero. So last estimate 0.1, and that's an annual growth for GDP. As you can see here, the consensus has been between 2 and 5%, and pretty much, the average of the range has been around 4 to 3.5%. So now they're saying that they see GDP at almost zero. So that's another reason why I think it's going to be really tough and so this is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. That's why I think it's going to be really tough for them they might raise rates once or twice. And all that will give them is some room to cut again if and when things get pretty bad. So I think that's another reason why I think the Fed is starting to tamp down on inflation. But at the same time, the president of the Atlanta Fed, he's his own bank has published that, but he's come out in the FT in an interview. Raphael Bostic says Fed could use half-point rate rise if needed, says official. So they're really confusing people, and all I think it means is they're just trying to play both sides, and that they don't really know what they're doing. So on one side, his bank, the Fed Bank of Atlanta, is saying GDP is going to be almost at zero. And then at the same time, he's saying that they could raise by half a point instead of a quarter. So it's all very confusing, I would say. But okay, we've got Steve Ross Holmes. Thank you, Steve Ross, for your super chat. Is this correct? If GDP is 6.5% and inflation 7%, nominal GDP is 13.5%. If true, does that mean inflation was really 15%? Not necessarily, Steve. I did a video. Actually, I'll bring it up. I still have it on my screen. I'll show you how they calculate GDP. I've got the equation here. So here we go. So GDP is consumption, private and corporate consumption, investments, private and corporate, and then government spending. And I would say the government spending is making GDP look a lot better than it is. As you can see here, government spending is almost 7 trillion. And I did a little calculation here, as you can see. If I can, let's see if I can zoom that. So if we take the GDP, which is 23.4 trillion, and we subtract government spending, and government spending is really not wealth, because they take that they borrow that or they tax that. You subtract that, the real GDP, private sector GDP, is 16.5 trillion. And the national debt, I think this was from, I took this from the 27th of January. And if you divide the national debt by the private GDP, we're actually seeing debt to GDP at 181% almost. So no, it doesn't mean that the inflation is 15%. But I would say by the way they used to calculate in the 80s, the CPI, it is 15%. But I would say as well, real private economy GDP is a lot worse than that number that you told us there. I hope that helps. Cash and carry, yeah. Hi, Carl. Nice to see you here. Says good to catch you live. Carl, I think Carl, you were on one of my Patreon supporters. Thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to say, a lot of you support me also through Patreon and also through PayPal. I noticed the other day someone wanted to send me a PayPal donation, and for some reason PayPal had like disabled the donation. So I've changed that. So if people were trying to send me donations through PayPal and they couldn't, now they can. Just to let you know, I don't know why they did that. Joker Alpha, why doesn't the Fed just go brut and call it record income revenue versus? Yeah, I mean they are going still. They haven't really started. They're still doing QE, and Powell said last week in the press conference that they're gonna stop doing QE, that they're gonna take in March, but we'll have to wait and see. If you look at the chart of the yield curve, the balance sheet, if you go assets, balance sheet, Federal Reserve, you Google that, you get that chart, and it's still going up, just like it was in 2021. So right now, they're talking tough and everything. They're saying they're going to do a lot of things, but they actually haven't done anything. And they've got about 4 to 6 weeks to prove that they're not just, barking. And unfortunately, I think a lot of things could happen, and probably not good, that would justify them to start printing again and keep rates low. LGX2, thank you for your super chat. Are supply chain issues causing inflation as the Fed claims? Doesn't fit Milton Friedman inflation. Yeah, LGX2, the Federal Reserve and other central banks and governments, they're always going to blame other things for rising prices, because what we're getting now is not inflation, it's rising prices. The inflation has been created, I would say, massively since the beginning of the century. After the dot-com bubble, Greenspan cut rates down to like 1% at the time, 1.5%, 2%. Bernanke made that speech in 2002 talking about QE, that they could basically use helicopter money. And then after 2007, 2008, they cut rates to zero. They started doing QE, and it didn't show up that much, but now it's showing up. So the supply chain stuff is just an excuse. If we had really healthy economies in the West, in the US and Europe and in the UK, we wouldn't have problems with supply chain. The supply chain is a symptom of the financialization of all the major economies in the West. And what the financialization has done, it's concentrated capital in the West into speculation, into financial engineering, and we've neglected the real economy, having supply chains in our own countries. We outsourced it all to China and other countries, and now it's coming home to roost. And yeah, whatever. So I agree with you. Milton Friedman was right in that sense of the word. Yeah, inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon, even though I don't agree with everything that Milton Friedman said, because when Nixon closed the gold window, he said that gold was going to go to almost to zero because it was demonetized. And I think he was wrong about that. He was a free market advocate, but he didn't advocate for abolishing central banks. And I think that was a big flaw of Milton Friedman. So Steve Ross Holmes, thank you again for your super chat. I guess my question is whether GDP is inflation adjusted. Yes, it is CPI adjusted. If so, and inflation is underestimated, then GDP would be, of course. Of course, it is overstated. Yeah, real GDP would probably really be negative if they used the measurements they did in the 80s, Steve Ross. And it would be even worse if you deducted government spending. And that's why The middle class is suffering. That's why we have huge wealth inequality. T4 parts, silver is doing okay. Well, it had a really good week prior to last week. Then last week it gave up a lot of the gains. And so gold as well was hammered. Uh, Going into the when was it? Wednesday, just before the Fed announcement, it was sold off for no reason. And then yeah, I think a lot of it is a little bit of manipulation. A lot of it, unfortunately, is that a lot of people speculate. They don't really buy real gold and silver. They speculate on the price and they get leveraged, and then they get, you know, yeah, and they get stopped out. It becomes speculative. Uh, Joker Alpha, last week silver was knocking on 25 per ounce. Today smashed down to 22.50. Yeah, I know Joker Alpha. As I said, I think it's partly a lot of people jumping on, speculators jump on the futures and the paper silver, and then all of a sudden the bullion banks smash it down and they get stopped out. But like you said, I don't think people are going out there and getting rid of their physical silver. And if, like you said, the premiums are still quite high, it is frustrating, but I think patience is really important with gold and silver. And unless the world, the natural laws of economics have changed, which I don't think they will ever change, I still expect you don't see any poor beggars or homeless people who have gold and silver, do you? And I'm not trying to brag here or anything. I'm just saying, yeah, it's a good store of value. And it's frustrating, but over the long term, uh, the tendency, as we know, is for fiat currencies to go to zero, and the Fed, the US dollar, the paper dollar, since the Fed was created, has lost 96.5% of its value. So I think the last 2 to 3%, it's going to accelerate, and we are in that state, in that stage of the loss of confidence. Jack, did Turkey give silver to the USA recently? I don't know. I didn't see anything to that effect. I haven't heard about that. Robert Schweissalm, why not integrate North and South American supply chains and have a freedom of movement? Well, yeah, that was part of the North American free NAFTA free trade area. I think North America free trade zone, you have Mexico and the US and Canada, like the EU, no borders. I think President Trump backtracked on that, and I'm not sure what's going on there now. But I think the supply chain is getting hurt now from all the mandates in Canada and also in the US. The US is trying to impose the same kind of mandates on truck drivers. So it could affect the whole supply chain. And Mexico, United States, and Canada is a huge trading area. I think Canada and Mexico are the biggest trading partners of the US, even bigger than China. Miles, thank you again for your super chat. Black Swan, nobody is speaking, is 738 billion tax returns hitting consumers' hands over the next few months. More demand, less supply, higher prices. Yeah. And I think the supply chain problems are not improving. I saw an article, I think it was on Zero Hedge from Michael Snyder, that the supply chain is affecting fertilizers in the US, so agriculture and food prices, and also the semiconductor supply chain problems are still pretty bad. And that's got to do with Taiwan. They provide 2/3 of the world's semiconductors, so it's not improving. And the truckers, all the stuff that's going on in Canada, the truckers protest, it's affecting, yeah, I think every automobile manufacturer in the US has at least one part that has to come from Canada. So it could be a problem there. HZJ79, thank you for your super chat. Canadian born wife watching your shows with me after 2 years of food disbelief and despair is so proud again. Beautiful country, beautiful people with terrible government. Keep trucking. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like with every country, you can say, I love my country, but I hate my government. And that's the way I feel about. I mean, I've been here in the UK I moved here in 1992, so almost 30 years. And I love the UK. I love the people, but government is always like, not only here, but everywhere, governments are not good, really. So anyway. JSB says Hope Olympics is awarding medal in Rio, gold and silver. I don't think they do. I think the gold medal in the Olympics is actually a silver medal, and it's plated with gold. So at least it's maybe real silver, but it's not real gold. It's just gold plated. Yeah, there you go. Moody James knows about it too. Why do banks short paper gold and silver? Asks Carlo Yaboni. Well, because gold and silver are real money. And, that's why, you would have thought that banks wouldn't care about trading gold and silver. Well, it's because if you look at banknote, if you go back historically, gold and silver are money. And what we think is cash or banknotes, they're just receipts for gold and silver. So, yeah, the name dollar, the name sterling, the name Deutschmark, the name French franc, all the money and name of currencies. I know the euro is different, but it's all to do with gold and silver. And up until 1914. There were promissory notes, but gold and silver circulated as money, real gold and silver coins. So if they allow the price of gold and silver to get out of hand, it will totally destroy their fiat currency system. And they're trying really hard. I think they will not succeed. And that's why I've been stacking gold and silver for 2 decades now. It's done, it's been a good place to be because in 2002, gold was at $250, $300. Silver was below $5. In the short term, there's a lot of volatility, but in the longer term, I think they won't be able to keep doing it because they're not really using real gold and silver to manipulate the price. They're creating shortages and they're suppressing the price. And that always ends up in higher prices. Yeah, copper is money too, Alan Zibelman. I'm sorry, I forgot copper. Copper, silver, and gold, yeah. JSB says JP Morgan loves physical silver. Yeah, I mean the bullion banks, what I think they try to do is keep the general public away from physical gold and silver. And at the same time, they they make a lot of fiat profits from it, but they stack as well. I would say they're not silly. Uh, Joker Alpha, Russia bought more gold. Should they go on a gold standard? How would that affect a collapse of the dollar? Well, I made a video, I think it was last week. Uh, One of the top politicians in Russia said that they could uh, approve some kind of gold-backed crypto ruble. So yeah, I think they will eventually do that, but I think they rather do it together with China, because doing it on their own could be dangerous. But it would affect the dollar massively if China and Russia came out and said, well, we're backing our currencies with gold. It would be basically a huge nail, another nail in the coffin of the petrodollar. Richard Mike, can you talk about why brokers need to take short positions on silver to hedge risk on silver they hold for customers? Well, I don't know where you heard that. You know, I was a futures and options broker, and I never had to hedge anything. You know, because your client will do the trade with the exchange. So let's say I'm broker Maneco 64, and Richard Martin calls me and says, I want to sell silver futures. I'll call the trader on the floor, the broker on the floor, the COMEX, and say, well, sell 20, you know, silver futures, and they'll do that. And I'll put that into your account. As a broker, I only get the commission. So I don't know where you're hearing that brokers have to hedge. So maybe investment banks, if they trade over the counter silver, for example, which is not on an exchange, if you go to JP Morgan and you say, oh, I want to buy, you know, 1,000 ounces of silver, well, they'll sell it to you. And what they'll do is, yeah, they will buy that. If anything, they will buy that to hedge, so they won't have an exposure. So I'm not sure, you know, who's talking about that the brokers hedge for their clients. They don't. And the thing is, we know that, like, for example, Bank of America, they're short like 800 million ounces of silver. And up until 3 years ago, they had almost no position in silver. So I don't think they're doing that for anyone. I think they're just helping the US Treasury to keep the silver price down by doing that. But they actually don't have any silver. Echo, does the Bank of England pay interest on its central reserves? Well, you know, right now, I think the Bank of England rate is 25 basis points. So they pay, you know, the member banks that are clearing members with the Bank of England, they pay them 25 basis points. So banks like Barclays, NatWest, Santander, the clearing banks, they get paid to leave bank money with the Bank of England or reserves. Damien J says, economists say that Japan is in a deflation, yet we look at gold and Japanese yen. Yeah, I know. I've talked about that already many times. You know, it's almost at 200,000, I think, yen, the price of gold. And I think back in the early 90s, it was like 50, 60,000. So yeah, gold is a good thing to have, and, you know, and silver in deflation and inflation. The times when gold doesn't really perform that well, I would say, is when you have what they call Goldilocks, like fairly low CPI, around 2-3%, where you have good GDP growth and the national debt is low, that's when gold doesn't do well, like it didn't do, for example, didn't do very well in the 90s, in US dollars. But like you said, yeah, people say Japan is in deflation, but gold is doing well there. Yeah, I agree. Bitcoinist, you are one of my favorite YouTubers, mate. Always like getting a notification with your latest upload stream. Thank you very much for that, and thanks for being here. Lily Robin says, I got the 2022 Awaken Series 5-ounce silver coin on SD Bullion today. Not a big fan, but have the others. Alan Hua, great idea to have Mario with M. Rogan. Rogan. Oh, you mean, do you mean Joe Rogan? Yeah, I mean, he's quite popular now, isn't he? You mean Monsieur Mario or Mr. Mario with Mr. Rogan? Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would help the channel if he wanted to interview me. Oh, echo. If Bank of England creates 10 million reserves to buy government bonds, does it need to pay interest? No, because they don't borrow that money from anyone. They just create it from nowhere, and they'll buy the government bonds from the market. So let's say several banks or market makers own, let's say there are 5 market makers, they own 2 million each. So what the Bank of England will do, they'll just call them on the phone and says, I'll buy 2 million from you, and you. and they can just do it from thin air. They don't they are the source of all the credit. So they don't have to pay anyone any interest. That's where the scam is. And there are a lot of people on YouTube who say that they borrow money into the system, and it's rubbish. They just create it out of thin air. The people that have to borrow, though, is the government. The government has to borrow it. When they issue gilts, the government has to borrow from the market and indirectly from the Bank of England. But the Bank of England itself, they don't pay any interest at all for creating those 10 million. They pay interest when, let's say, some of the banks want to leave money with them, right? They want to put reserves back with them. Then they'll pay those banks interest. But when they create 10 million through QE, no, they just create it out of thin air. That's why it's such a huge scam. Scott 49 140. Have you heard of Really Graceful? I have. I have listened to her. She's really good. I haven't listened to the latest one about the whole House of Rothschilds. I mean, I've read like 2 or 3 books about the Rothschilds. Let me get some of them here. I'll show it to you. This book was written in the 19th century. So it's the Rothschilds, The Financial Rulers of Nations, by John Reeves. So this was written 1887, and back then they're already mega rich. I think it's a really good book to read. Very interesting. If you guys want to, yeah, really good book Financial Rulers of Nations, John Reeves. I think there's a Niall Ferguson book as well on the Rothschilds. I've got that one here as well. That's a good one too. But I would say, Niall Ferguson, the guy who wrote about the Rothschilds, he's a bit of a Rothschild apologist. So I would say this is a much better one. It doesn't, it's it's 1887, so it's an old one, but nothing really changes. I would really read this one. The Ken, thank you for your super chat. The Ken says, always enjoy your content, Mario. Hello from Canada. Thank you very much, and great to see that the truckers are doing something in Canada. And it's funny because I'm originally from Brazil. I've been here for 30 years. A lot of people think a lot of times they say, oh, where are you from in the States? And a lot of times they ask me, are you Canadian as well? I don't know if my accent is Canadian, so I always get asked that question. Joker, Charles Schulten, Spotify will pay Monaco 64, 10 million sign up bonus. Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? 10 million. I think Joe Rogan got 100 million. And I think Prince Harry and his wife got about 20 million. And apparently they're complaining about Joe Rogan. I think Spotify would rather have Joe Rogan than them. Joker Alpha, can you explain how printing more currency to pay off national debt is a solution? Well, it isn't a solution. It's called monetizing the debt, and it leads to hyperinflation. It leads to the collapse. It's just kicking the can down the road. The Bank of England, technically, they're not printing the money to buy the debt, because what they do is they buy the debt from the banks. So let's say the UK government, they'll come out at an auction and sell 2 billion worth of gilts. And the banks, they're called primary dealers, they'll buy that bond. And they don't care because they know the Bank of England is coming and buying it from them for a slightly higher price. It can be minuscule, but they'll make a few million from it. And that's how it happens. So it's just a scam. If the Bank of England bought directly from the Treasury, then, people would wake up, I think. And I think people are waking up. It's not a solution. It's a really bad thing. It's like you borrowing money and then giving it to your children, and they think that they're getting real money. And then when you die, they've got all this debt they didn't know about, and they have to pay for it. So it's not a solution. It's just kicking the can down the road, unfortunately. Tom Adawa, all middle class don't store gold, store food for 5-10 years. Shit is unbelievable. I kind of agree with you. You have to be prepared for things getting worse. But, storing gold and silver is good because they will always have some value. And storing food for 5-10 years is not that easy. And gold and silver don't go bad. But I agree with you. You have to be aware of those things. You maybe, not everyone can have a small farm, but you could be close to a place where you have access to, small farms so that you can have access to food. Echo, if salaries go up with inflation, will Sunak be happy because you'll get higher taxes? Yeah, it will help, but the salaries never go up as much as inflation. But yeah, if they can keep inflating and they keep rates low, Yeah, it will help. It's called financial repression. But in the end of the day, the people who suffer will be the general public. Alan Roy says Blackstone owns half of Neil Young's library. Well, I heard of Neil Young, but I don't even know what he sings. But it looks like Spotify prefers Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan hasn't said anything that's not true. He's had scientists, doctors there, within interviews. Richard Martin says, thank you. What do you think of PSLV and Sprott Platinum? Well, I would avoid all ETFs, even Sprott. Not that I don't trust Sprott, but if you really want to own precious metals, you should do it physically. Platinum, I think platinum is going to do well. I think all commodities and tangibles are going to do well. So, yeah. But, if it's not convenient for you to own physical precious metals, then fine, PSOV should be okay. But I try to encourage people always to buy real physical gold and silver, because the more paper you buy, the longer the bankers can keep their scam going. Carl, thank you for your super chat. Jeremy Grantham talking about Three Sigma super bubble late 2022. Yeah, I mean, Jerry, I spoke about Jeremy Grantham last year. He's been calling for a lot of bubbles, and he's been proven wrong. And he's like a very well-known value investor, and I think he's right. The problem is that the Fed can keep, right now they're saying they're going to tighten, but they could very well turn around and say they're going to start, increase QE and keep rates low. And you could see the stock market go up quite a bit. I think what will end up happening is what happened in the Zimbabwe and Venezuela, where I think Venezuela, Caracas exchange was the best performing a few years ago, 2017, but their currency went through the floor, so I think that's what eventually will happen. And I think people like Jeremy Grantham and Dave Hunter, I don't know Dave Hunter that well, but they're too focused on just the stock market, and they don't look at the currency. And I think it's really important to look at the currency, because yeah, the Dow could be at 50,000, but then if gold goes up to, like, let's say even 5,000, that means the Dow gold ratio has gone from around 20 to 10. So, and even in the year 2000, the Dow gold ratio was above 40. So in terms of real money, it's not going to do well. So I'm not sure if he's going to be proven wrong. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, Carl. They don't look at the Dow gold ratio, because back up until 1934, that's what the stock market was measured against. Max Kaiser thinks Bitcoin will hit over 200,000. Well, he thought he was going to do that in 2021. He could be right. Who knows? But Bitcoin, I have the exposure to cryptos, and I have spoken about Bitcoin before, but I think Bitcoin is not like it's more for the speculator. It's not for someone who's looking to retire, who wants stability. I don't think so. So, because we were at 68,000 last year. Now we got down to 34. And if you're thinking of retiring, you don't want to see your wealth move around like that. Joker Alpha, Mario, is banking with Glint a good idea, even though you don't hold the gold? Well, actually, Joker Alpha, I do have a referral code with Glint. It's Mario Glint, Mario Glint 79, I think. Let me check here. I forgot. And why did I say you don't, you know, you don't bank with Glint? Because they're not a bank. So what you do with Glint, you send them the fiat money, and they'll keep the fiat money for you, if you want, but you can also sell it for gold or dollars. They have yeah, it's referral code is Mario Glint 79. No, I think Glint is a good company. They approached me in 2018, and I've been kind of working with them since then. I have a Glint account. A lot of my viewers have Glint accounts. All I would say is that for me, I have some of my gold with Glint, but I prefer having physical. But some people might prefer having it with Glint, and they don't lend your gold out. They don't lend your money out. They're like a traditional depository, if you want to call them a bank. And your gold is held in your name, allocated in the vault in Switzerland. And I've actually once asked them to redeem the gold, and they sent it to me. So they'll do that as well. So yeah, I like Glint and I trust them. So there you go. Carl, thank you for your super chat. Do you know about Richard Werner? Yeah, I do. But I do know about him. He's an interesting economist. I agree with a lot of things that he says, but yeah, he explains well how the monetary system works. He explains how it's the commercial and private banks who create the currency through creating loans, right? You borrow money to buy a car, from a bank, and they put the money into your account, and the car becomes like the security. He explains that really well. Where I disagree with him, he believes that the government, he believes that there should be central banks, but that the government should be in charge of the central bank and allocate credit. I don't agree with that. I don't believe in central banks, but he's written also about Japan, how the Japanese economy after World War II was basically like a pre-war, was like the Americans allowed the Japanese to run their economy like a war economy, and it worked really well. But I'm not sure, in the West that we have that same mentality, but who knows? And I think China is running it a little bit like the Japanese did, but they're called communists, but the Japanese weren't. Lord Humongous says, I hold my gold and silver with Humongous Depository. Yeah, I mean, I just try to tell people what I think. I prefer, like Lord Humongous says, having my own depository. They're also like gold investments. They will keep your gold there as well, and you can go and check your gold. Glint's gold is in Zurich, Switzerland, so it's more difficult to go and see your gold, but it's an option. And they give you a MasterCard, and if you want, you can spend that gold, or you can switch it to fiat or whatever. We got about 10 minutes to go. LG says, disagree. Richard doesn't promote central banks. Maybe he doesn't. What he talks about, maybe I didn't really put it that clearly. He thinks that local. He's for like a lot of small, decentralized local banks, right? And that's not a bad thing. So that they create credit for local businesses. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. Um, I'm not really sure what he thinks about central banks, but yeah, he's an interesting guy, Richard Werner. Uh, and we could definitely do with a lot more banks in the UK. We've only got 5 or 6 big banks. And I think the whole problem is having the Bank of England, because they create this moral hazard. And I think in the last 150 years, we've probably gone from having 200 banks to having less than 10. And I think in Germany, where Richard Werner's from, there's a lot of, Germany is not just Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank and Dresdner Bank. There's loads of small local banks and state banks in Germany. And I think that's a good thing. JSB RFK Jr. for president. I don't think he wants to run for president. I think if he was going to run for president, he would have already run. J Masson H, conspiracy theory equals CIA. Well, the CIA apparently created the term back in the 60s in order to discredit people who wanted to find out a bit more about the JFK assassination and the RFK and Martin Luther King assassinations. Scott 49,140. Weird how gold investors only have like 3 silver coins on their site. Well, it doesn't mean that's all the silver coins they have. Maybe they just haven't renewed their website, or they will do it. The best thing to do is, if you want to find out more, is to phone them if you're in the UK and talk to them, or send them an email. I'm sure they can get whatever you want. Benoit Guillou, Max Kaiser is just as deranged and shaky as Saylor. Did you see him shout, "We're not selling" at the Bitcoin conference? Yeah, I saw that. You know, I met Max Kaiser about 12, 11 years ago. When I worked in the city, I went to a gold conference with a colleague of mine. I think it was an FT conference or something. And he was there with Stacy. And I had a chat with him. And he was strange, and I only met him for a few minutes and had a quick chat. And he just came across as really, it's like he wasn't there. He like looked right through you. He wasn't like genuine. So I thought he was really weird when I met him in person. And the fact that at the time, though, he was pro gold, pro silver, and then all of a sudden he switched. So yeah, anyway, he's a little bit fanatical, I think, like Saylor. Echo, if I can't trust Royal Mint to hold my gold, who can I trust? Yeah, I don't trust the Royal Mint because they're part of the government. Yeah, that's who can you trust except yourself? But gold investments, I trust them. But even then, you never know. They hold they can hold your gold. You can actually go there with your gold or silver, and they'll go with you to the vault. I think they keep it at the silver vaults in London, and they'll show you where they keep it, and they'll charge you a small fee per ounce. So you could do that. Or if you, but yeah, the Royal Mint, I wouldn't trust them personally. Mike Shemansky, March rate hikes. Well, we're not really sure if there are going to be any rate hikes. Even in the last press conference, Jay Powell didn't actually say we're going to have rate hikes. He said there's a possibility of rate hikes. I think it's already priced in. So, yeah, if any, I don't know what's going to happen to gold and silver. I'm not concerned, really. That's the problem. People are too short term. They think of gold as a trade, and they want to make fiat dollars out of it. And I know it's nice to see that gold is doing well and the dollar is going down, but that's all it is. And I don't think the Federal Reserve can raise rates that much. At most, they can go up to maybe 1.5, and then they'll have to backtrack. And I don't think inflation or prices are going to come back down. So I'm not too concerned. Usually, the old adage is buy the rumor, sell the fact, or sell the rumor, buy the fact. So there you go. Carlos Garcia, I will trust Monaco 64. Yes, no doubts. Well, even me, you leave some stuff with me and I'm burgled or something, and they take everything, and there you go. So nothing is in life is certain, but I would definitely not keep it with the government, because they could very easily use force majeure. There's a war that kicks out, or if there's like a cyber attack, they could freeze everything, even the Royal Mint. LG, did you see that Zuckerberg failed at creating stablecoin US government treasures? Was that, what was it called? I think a few years ago, I don't know what he called it. I guess it could have been a bit of competition, because Facebook has got a lot of subscribers, people who are on Facebook. Because for a currency to become popular, if you have a lot of big network, which Facebook does, yeah, I mean, they, yeah, they would be, I'm not surprised they stopped them from doing it. Helen of Troy, Helen of Troy Ounce, thank you so much for your daily videos. It really helps me get my day started on the right track. Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for the nice, kind words. Yeah, Lord Humongous. I think Ron Paul had that on his desk in Congress. It says, don't steal because government hates competition. I agree with that. Billy's waking up. I'll take one or two more questions, and then it's time to call it a day. Can you explain how all the currencies will go to zero? Sandy Anderson asked, not only the US dollar. Well, because you have to go back to 1944 and the Bretton Woods Agreement that set up the US dollar as the major reserve currency. And all the other major currencies were pegged. Well, the dollar was pegged to gold directly, and the other ones were pegged indirectly to gold through the dollar. So the dollar's been the leader of all the other fiat currencies. So if the dollar goes, they will all go. And it's because all these major currencies, all the countries that are in the system, they have to have dollar reserves to back their currency. And that's why countries like Russia and China are getting rid of a lot of their dollars, especially Russia, and buying gold. So yeah, the currencies that probably will do the worst, I would say, is like the British pound and the Brazilian real. They have a lot of dollar reserves, and even the Japanese yen. But I would say the ruble will end up doing okay. Carlos Garcia, for IMF director next day, gold standard money executive order. I haven't looked at that. I'll have a check. All right. Thank you, everyone. I wish you all a great rest of the day. And thank you for participating. Thank you for your support.